Okay, so if your mower cranks but it won't start, you might have a bad fuel pump. If you happen to have a transparent fuel filter like this one, go ahead and crank the engine over and you should see fuel filling up that fuel filter. If not, go ahead and pull the fuel line off the carburetor and crank the engine over again and you should see fuel coming out of that fuel line. Okay, so if you want to verify that the fuel lines are good all the way back to the gas tank, you can pull the fuel line off at some point and put a suction device on there and you should see fuel coming through. This is a mechanical style. It's got a lever that goes in and runs on the camshaft, kind of like the old cars used to have. Just 2 bolts right there. We'll go ahead and pull our lines off and we'll pull that puppy out of there. This top line right here is kind of broke, so it just comes right out anyway. Okay, so there's our lever right there that runs on the camshaft. Now also, if you notice, there is a orange gasket right here. This is the only gasket that it uses to seal. You'll want to take notice of what you had originally. The new filter does come with a plate and a gasket. If you don't have that originally, you don't want to use that. You want to put it back the way it was or your spacing will be off. We're going to go ahead and clean up the side of the block right here with some brake clean and a sanding sponge. If you happen to have a paper gasket welded to the block, you'll have to get that off, probably with a razor blade and some brake clean and some patience. But this one cleaned up real nice, no problem at all. We'll go ahead and take a paper towel and get any residue out of there that might have fallen in. Here's our 2 fuel pumps side by side. The new one is on the right. What we want to do is match up what we had before. So we just had the orange seal in there against the block, so just press that into the groove right there if that's what you have. And you may be wondering what this big snap ring is for right here. Well, this is just a tool that is used to get those nipples into the fuel pump. A pair of snap ring pliers would be very handy. Honestly, this is about the worst design I think I've ever seen in my life. I've already got the top nipple installed already. But what you want to do is depress those 2 little indentations on each side right there. So you got to get that snap ring into those 2 grooves. And yeah, it kind of chews up the plastic while you're doing that because it's just not a good design. And what that does is it'll squeeze that spring right there so that it allows you to push the piece in there. Now those snap ring pliers tend to get stuck in there, so if you kind of take the snap ring and wiggle it around, they'll come right out. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and add just a drop of oil to the O-ring on this one. That way when that goes in there, it won't tear that O-ring right there. And just press it in, making sure, because this one is on a 90-degree angle, that it matches the angle that the old one was set at. So that's a very important tip right there. Once you get that in there, it has to be all the way down and flush. You can just wiggle the snap ring and get it out, and that's all you have to do with that. Now what happens is a lot of times that snap ring will chew up the plastic, and those little spring square things right there, they don't want to pop all the way back out. But they do need to be all the way out. So what I did was I just took a little screwdriver and I kind of dug around in there until I was able to get those to pop back out and flush with the surface right there. You want to make sure and do this on the top one as well. It's the same procedure exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new piece of hose right here. That way we don't want to use that old fuel line. So very simple on that. And what you want to do is go ahead and put that on first before you install the pump. It'll just make it a whole lot easier. And I'll go ahead and add my clamp to that, and then we'll tighten it up when we get it on the engine. Okay, so what I'm going to do before I put the fuel pump in is go ahead and add just a drop of oil to that lever right there. That way when it engages the camshaft, we're not completely dry until the engine gets its own oil in there, and just work that into the hole right there. And then once you do that, just kind of find the right angle to get your fuel line started on that metal line that goes between that and the carburetor. And then once you get that thing started, you can go ahead and put the bolts back in. I did look up the torque spec on these, and it was right around 40 inch-pounds or so. If you don't have an inch-pound torque wrench, then go ahead and use good and tight as your reference. But keep in mind that this is a plastic fuel pump, and over-tightening it will probably crack it. So don't over tighten it. But if you do have an inch-pound wrench, it's probably around 40 inch-pounds or so. Just go ahead and tighten up both clamps right there. And yeah, I don't like these crazy wing nut fuel clamps, but it's the only one I got, and we're going to go ahead and use it. Now at this point, the mower should be pretty much ready to test, but in this particular case, this thing has been sitting for about a year. Somebody put a new carburetor on it, and then it quit, and they let it sit, so that carburetor is kind of gummed up, and I'm not going to try to start it like that. So we're going to just test it, and we'll be able to see it work. So I did put on a new fuel filter because the old one was just nasty because this thing's been sitting, but we're going to go ahead and crank this thing over, and we should see fuel coming into there, and we do. That's a good sign. I've got this thing temporarily rigged up right now to go into a jar. That way we can crank it over and see the fuel coming out, and then I pretty much know that when I get the carburetor fixed, it's going to run. And as you can see, our fuel pump doesn't have any leaks, and that's a very good sign. Hope this video has been helpful. Thanks for watching.